Okay, here we are on Mensch Life on thatchannel.com. Today is January the 12th. Welcome back. It's great to be here again. I have with me Dave Sheskin. You can see him sitting here across the desk from me, and it's a pleasure to have Dave with us. Dave is a retired military officer, was raised in Canada, spent many years in Israel and also abroad working for Israel's Secret Service. So he's a very special guest. It's a delight to have him in the studio here. Today we're going to talk about his new book and about his experience working in Secret Service over the years, dealing with Islamic radicals and different things like that. So that should be very interesting. And also a bit later on in the show, we have the Jewish rapper Eitan G. Very talented young man, was recently on Howard Stern, got a lot of stuff going on. And he's going to be here. We're going to look at one of his recent videos called Believe. And we're also going to have a chat with him, and maybe if we're lucky, he'll do some rapping. I saw him do this little thing on Howard Stern. It's called Making a Moitzi. And but it's really cute if you have time to hang around later, Dave. He says, I'm making a moitzi. So it should be entertaining. Anyhow, I don't want to spoil his act. Dave, it's a delight to have you in the studio. You've written this book called Waltzing with the Wicked, and people can visit the website to find out more and get a copy of the book. They can buy it through Amazon, whatever. The website is waltzingwicked.com. I'm just going to give you a little background about Dave before we get into it. Dave was raised in Montreal, so he has a unique story. He was a typical nice Jewish boy, if I can say. Well, so maybe a little bit nice, but anyway, typical story of a young man. Worked in a menswear store, a high-end menswear store, and he was 24 years of age. His brother calls him up and says, "You have to come down to Israel now. It was a 6-day war. We need you here. You must come." So Dave packed up and he left and he went, and that was the beginning of a very long journey. Starting off working in a Mossad, joining the military in 67, 69, went to the military academy, became a lieutenant, a liaison officer in the Golan, a major, and eventually into Israeli intelligence, and a very interesting career. This book, Waltzing with the Wicked, we'll talk more about that. But Dave, tell us about how did it all happen? I mean, this is... when somebody hears about somebody who spent their career searching out terrorists in Europe, they wouldn't imagine a Toronto boy. But how did it happen for you?
Well, it's the Montreal Boy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right, Montreal.
We were a little more courageous. We took on more than we didn't look at Toronto back then as being, very, very active in wanting to help Israel. But no, I received a phone call from my brother, and I felt like the phone burning in my hands. Here I'm, helping out a customer behind the counter, and 2 days later I'm in Tel Aviv.
Right.
And now what am I going to do? I see the women are beautiful, so I had some ideas.
Okay.
They sent me to the Mossad first for a very short period of time. I met a young lady and fell in love, decided that I'm going to stay there for a while. Then I used to look at the soldiers walking in the streets carrying these little Uzis, and I said, I would look good in one of those uniforms carrying a gun.
Right.
I always wanted to carry a gun.
Sure. Why not?
So I had a BB gun when I was a kid, but it didn't do any damage.
Right. Uzi would be better.
Uzi would have been better.
Okay.
And, I went to the military academy. I was a liaison officer to United Nations for a couple of years, monitoring both enemies in the Golan Heights. And when I say both enemies, enemy number one was the Syrians on the other side of the Yarmouk River, and even bigger enemy, United Nations.
Right.
Because they were very Arab at the time.
Okay.
The nations that were up there.
I don't think that's changed, but okay.
Well, no, never. Yeah, that didn't change. And they used to document breaches of the ceasefire between us and the Syrians, but it was always, they made it look better for the Syrians. So when the Syrians opened fire, the UN would say, well, you opened fire first, and I had to sign a document and saying, okay, you know, I agree with this or not.
Right.
And they turned out to be a bigger enemy than the Syrians or the Egyptians or the Jordanians.
Right. Well, that's what we see today as well in the UN.
Then I was, my brother called me, and he said that he was in Montreal, by the way, at the time.
Okay.
And he said that people are taking photographs of him in the street. He's being followed. And then my sister said, yeah, a lot of my photographs are missing from the house, and birth certificates, school certificates, etc., etc.
Okay.
What I didn't know is I was being scouted by Mossad. You call them talent scouters.
Okay.
They follow you. They follow your family. If they feel that you would suit their needs, then they would approach you.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's a pretty elaborate scouting process.
That's the way it works.
Okay.
But what they do is when they approach you, they don't say, we're approaching you, you know, this is the IDF or this is Israeli intelligence. They said they're the Sachnut, which is, you know, the Jewish agency.
Yes.
And what they did is they said, why don't you come and meet with us? You speak English and French and Yiddish and German. You're perfect in Hebrew and you speak Arabic. So meet with us, and we'd like you to go abroad and work for us and try to bring Jews to the Holy Land.
Right.
And that was where it all started.
Okay.
And first day I met with them, I found out that it wasn't a Jewish agency.
When you got to Israel?
When I got to, no, yeah, I was already in Israel.
Oh, you were already in Israel? Okay.
I was already there.
Right, okay.
And I was approached, interviewed. My wife and I went through numerous psychological evaluations to see if either of us would fit into it, because your wife has to know what you're doing or they won't take you.
Right.
So my wife agreed to go along with it.
Right.
I had a son at the time. She says, well, I have one child at home. I could manage. The money was good. They would take care of her needs. And she was not to tell anybody.
Okay.
But what she did do is she called her father one day, and she says, I'm in a dilemma. I don't know what to do. I made a decision. I'm starting to regret it.
Okay.
So she, excuse the expression, screwed things up for me for a while.
Right.
But they wanted me.
Right.
So they said, okay, we're not taking you into Mossad, but what we're going to say is that you are an employee of the Jewish agency, as the cover would have been anyway.
Right. Okay. Right.
So my wife thought I was working for the Jewish agency.
Okay.
When she found out that I lied to her, of course the marriage ended.
Right. Okay.
And I had 2 children by then.
Right.
But I chose my career over my wife and kids.
Right.
And thinking back now, hindsight being 20/20, that I regret.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had one daughter that's disowned me completely. Another daughter that says you were never there for me, and that's why she says she needs. She's till this day she's 40 or almost 40, and
right.
She sees an analyst weekly.
Yeah.
All because of what I did.
Yeah.
So I did good, and I did bad as well.
So is there no way to work for the Secret Service and still? So I know we talk personally, and I don't want to dig too deep because I know there are some personal issues and things for privacy reasons. But is there no way, like, is this a typical story of somebody who works in Mossad or Secret Service abroad? Like, do they have to make those kinds of sacrifices where they're going to miss their kids' birthday parties and possibly bar mitzvah and things like that? I mean, is that the choice that they all have to make?
They all have to make, and as far as Israeli intelligence is concerned, they prefer married men.
Yes,
because your need to survive is stronger.
Right.
You make mistakes when you're single and you don't have anybody to support or to go home to. So everybody has to go through that stage.
Right.
And they're usually young officers who discuss it with their wives.
Right.
But most of the wives don't talk about it.
Right.
My ex did.
Right.
And that caused me a lot of problems.
Right.
So for the 19 years that I was with them, many of those years were in Europe. It's because I didn't want to come home and face her.
Right.
So,
but that wasn't really your fault. I mean, you had discussed it with her as you were supposed to.
Yes.
She agreed, and then she went and told her dad, and then things kind of went haywire.
Well, she didn't only. Sorry for interrupting, but she didn't only discuss it with me. When we had to make that decision, and she agreed to it.
Yes.
We had to meet in Tel Aviv. We met in a room. There must have been about 16 of us in the room, and we went through very heavy interrogation, both her and I.
Right.
At one point, even to see if she was capable of handling it. One of the agents or one of the gentlemen in the room walked behind her, and slapped her in the back of the head, and said, "Does your husband know that you were a prostitute at one time before you met him?" And I just looked up,
Okay.
Well, I knew he was trying to edge me
techniques,
on
to
see the reaction.
So what happened?
Well, she stood strong, and I said, "I know what you're trying to do, so quit it."
Okay.
And he says, "Okay."
Right.
And then we passed a psychiatric evaluation, which was then at the Bar Ilan University in Tel Aviv. And everything was okay until she called her father. So we had to change the story, but I wasn't going to leave my career. I was ecstatic.
Well, you know what? I think you did the right thing. I mean, I'm a family man, and I'm lucky. I feel because I have the opportunity to in my career to be with my kids. But you had a calling. You had a calling. And I think you went there with your wife. You did all the right things. But by the time she changed her mind, I mean, I think the horse was already out of the barn, so to speak. And a man who stays home, okay, just to say he's there, all right. If you're not there in spirit and in heart and soul, then you're not going to be much good to your family. So, I mean, I don't know what happened after that, if things could have been somehow rectified or whatever. But you're not the first person to go through more than one wife. 4. So you've got 4. Well, listen, you've paid an incredible service to the country. You have a calling. Now Nathan Shepard is a character in the book, and I know that there's obviously a lot of parallels. I'm not going to say it's 100% or whatever, but there are a lot of parallels. And Nathan Shepard was like #1 in his graduating class out of over 100 people who were being scouted. I mean, my sense is that. And from reading the book, and people should definitely check this book out because it was an awesome read. Waltzing with the Wicked. I'll hold it up here for the camera. People can go to the website. They can get that on Amazon or what have you. Incredible story. You were right in the heart of things, Dave. I mean, what can you tell us? I realize that there's some privacy issues and what have you, security. But what can you tell us about your career in the Mossad, looking for terrorists?
Most of the time, I think I was in either France, Hungary, or Romania, Belgium. But France was the place where all the terrorist leaders decided to set up house, so to speak. And all we had to do was find where they were, find their locations, monitor their movements, report back to headquarters, and then have headquarters decide what should be done with these terrorists.
Okay.
They were, of course, very, very radical. Most of them were an offshoot of Abu Nidal's group, like even the Fatah was part of Nidal at one time. And they were vicious. There were some, they used to paint swastikas on the synagogues and the Jewish community centers. And I remember on one occasion, and till this day I'm affected by this, we were in a little town called Shell, just on the outskirts of Paris. Chelles, I think it was spelled. And there was local Arabs walking with scissors. And when the pious Jews would walk to shul, temple,
Right.
they would grab them by the whiskers and they would cut off their beards. And they did this to children. You know, the children with the,
Right.
we used to call payas. And they were very violent in their nature. But it wasn't only us. At the time, we joined together with other agencies of Friends of Israel,
Right.
so to speak. I mean, CIA and Israel work well together. The MI6 and Israel worked very well together.
Right.
Won't talk about Canada now. The relationship with Canada wasn't that strong, but we worked together, and we managed to find the places, the hiding places of
Right.
some of these organizations, these terrorists, like Hamad al-Khalifa, one of them that's mentioned in the book. And then they knew we were after them, and we followed them throughout Europe
Right.
until they were dealt with appropriately.
Right.
Without saying, of course, who
Right. Well,
delivered the final blow.
These were guys who were responsible for, organizing all kinds of terrorist attacks, blowing up hospitals and all different things.
They did things that didn't even make the news. For example, there's a little hospital in Turkey, and I have to say this because this was painful, and it was called the Jewish Hospital. But it wasn't only Jews there; it was just a hospital for geriatrics.
Right.
The patients are all geriatric. The majority of them that were in there were 80 plus, terminal disease.
Right.
And 4 terrorists entered that hospital. 2 came in dressed up in a doctor's gown. They grabbed hold of some doctors as hostages and nurses.
Right.
They got into the medicine. It's like a closet full of where they keep all the medicine. And they took out a poison, I think they called it panachromium bromide or something. What it does is it stops your muscles, so it stops the heart. And they went from patient to patient, injecting them.
Right.
Turkey was embarrassed by
my
this.
God. Okay.
So they asked the Israeli government, let the press not hear of this. Because remember, we are the only Muslim nation anywhere that supports Israel. We had a good relationship with them. Fortunately, now it's not as good as it used to be. But they were vicious. Abu Nidal was vicious. Arafat and his henchmen were vicious. They blew up schools. They killed Jewish people indiscriminately. And at the time, or I think just before that, it was de Gaulle said that things like this don't take place in France. Oh boy, but did they ever?
Right.
Did they ever? So that was where I spent most of my time with my female partners.
Okay.
One was beaten up very, very severely.
Yes.
So we had to send her home
Right.
to Israel. And she was a very famous family, by the way. I can't say the name of the family. And the other one was a Christian girl from France who was going to get married to a Muslim from Syria.
Right.
But she couldn't stand their the religion, the customs, so on and so forth. And she ended up becoming an agent for the Israeli Mossad.
Okay.
She came to Israel. She went through training, went back to Europe. She became my partner as husband and wife.
Right.
And that's where we did the best work.
Right.
And then she couldn't take any more, so finally ended up with a male partner.
Right. Yeah.
And
well, and a lot of this, the details are told in this book, Waltzing with the Wicked. So I'm familiar with some of the circumstances you're describing. Now, I want to ask you, Dave, about terrorism today. I mean, you've seen firsthand what the terrorists were doing and what they were like back in the 70s. How do you see it today? I mean, and how has it evolved? Is it more dangerous? Is it the same, or how would you describe it?
Well, it's far more dangerous than it was in the 70s. in the 70s, the small percentage of the population was Muslim and radical. Today in Europe, you have over 50 million Muslims, and I would say pretty close to half are really radical, really fundamentalists. And they swore that the last bastion of Western civilization for them, the big trophy for them, is North America.
Right.
And they won't be happy until they get here. They set up their enclaves, which, by the way, they have them all over Canada and the States now. And I don't think the people here realize the danger, the threat that we're facing. Now, you and I may not pay the price, but if we don't do something about our immigration laws right now, our children and grandchildren are going to pay a very, very heavy price.
Right.
There's, I know now of between 35 and 40 enclaves that are strictly Islamic militant enclaves throughout the United States. They even have...
I mean, if you know about them, I would assume the U.S. government must know about them.
Of course, but they want to be politically correct and not do something wrong.
So so they don't want the public to know. And I mean, when you say enclave, like what are these people doing?
Well, a lot of the Islamists do. They set up these enclaves where they come over. Let's say legally, they get their immigration papers.
Right.
They set up these little communities, and they're completely surrounded by fences or some kind of border around them.
Right.
And nobody dare enter them, not even the local authorities, because they say it's not worth it. We'll be killed. And as long as they don't, the local authorities don't see honor killings, they let them live their life. But there's honor killings taking place in these enclaves, and the bodies are buried in the enclaves.
Right.
So the local authorities don't know about it.
Okay.
And if we don't change the laws now, and find a way of monitoring who comes into this country.
Yes.
I mean, I can't worry about the States now because I live in Canada. But we have to do something. I have 16 different things that I would change as far as immigration, but I have no influence here. And but I just want to, who's ever listening to me now, you've got to write to your MPs, your MPPs, Dalton McGuinty, even the Prime Minister. And we have a good one now, by the way, who wants to change some of the immigration laws. But we have to do something now because our kids are going to pay such a heavy, heavy price. Really, really, it's going to be really bad here. Within the next, I think the next 3 decades, I won't be alive, but somebody's going to write a book, how the year 2030, how it was in 2010, and what we could have done to change the situation.
Right.
That's how bad it's becoming.
Okay.
And
well,
they will rule. They will.
Well, I mean, I tend to be a little more optimistic. I don't know if it's my faith or whatever it is, but okay. So I mean, obviously the honor killings are a problem and a sign that this kind of fundamentalism is alive and well. But I mean, there's besides the honor killings, I mean, do we have proof of terrorist act? I mean, it's not enough to say that they keep to themselves, and I mean, you have to have really, I think, proof of plans to blow up buildings or do whatever it is that they want to do before you can really say that they're a threat to the larger society. Don't you think?
Well, you see, I look at terror differently. Terror is a way of frightening people. That's terror. That's where it starts.
Right.
And, for example, here in Mississauga, I think it was maybe just a couple of years ago, a young girl who took off her face covering. She was killed in Mississauga.
Right.
I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah.
So they're instilling fear into us, because if they can kill their own children, just because they took the hijab or whatever, just because they took it off, and this poor little girl, she wanted to be like her friends.
Right.
If they're willing to kill their own children for the sake of a distorted religion, and really the fundamentalists, I call it distorted, what do they want to do to us?
Right.
When they go ahead in Detroit and they start building super mosques in front of churches, knowing that nobody's going to hurt them, that's terror.
Right.
And we see the start of it now with this this officer in Fort Hood, and then in I think it's Fort Dixie, the Toronto 18.
Yes.
I mean, it's beginning to boom, and I know what it's going to turn into.
Okay.
You know, your children one day, I'm afraid, are going to be fearful of going to school on their own because they're going to be harassed. Or, God forbid, even worse than that.
Okay. Okay, Dave, we're going to take a short break now, and then we're going to come back and see what other ideas you have about how we can curb some of this extremism. So
It'll be a pleasure.
Hang in there. We'll be right back. We're back here on Mensch Life. Welcome back. Thanks very much for sticking with us. I'm here with Dave Sheskin, and we're talking about his latest book, Waltzing with the Wicked. Right here, and we're talking about immigration laws. And Dave was going to have some, in the remaining few minutes that we have, he's going to give us some suggestions on how we might be able to change some immigration laws.
Well, first thing I recommend that if somebody wants to immigrate to this country, make sure they know the language.
Yes.
Let them apply in English,
Right.
but English that they've written.
Right.
2, make them wait 5 to 7 years. Let's check them out. You could do a check and see if they're okay, if they're radical, if they've been in prison or things like that.
Right.
And then when the 5 or 7 years are up, do another check. This time go into Interpol. Let's see if they belong to any organizations that are not, not what we want to have here in Canada. I would ask them put up a bond for every person in that family. Put up, let's say, a $5,000 or $10,000 bond per person. In the first year, if the father can't find work, use the money of the bond.
Right.
Right. Let them not go to schools that are strictly Muslim schools. The children should mingle. They shouldn't have their faces ever covered. They must adjust to the Canadian way of life.
Right.
And if they can't get themselves settled within, let's say, 3, 4 years or 5 years, whatever, deport them.
Right.
Deport them. But we have to do more of a thorough check at the beginning.
Yes.
Because you can call the police somewhere in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and they'll say, no, we have no problem with them. But Interpol may have other information about them that we should have.
Right. So we don't check Interpol today?
No, we don't. As far as I know, we don't.
Right.
But once they get here, they've got to live the Canadian way of life.
Right.
No enclaves, no covering your head from face to toe where nobody can see your face.
Right.
Because you see these Muslim women and with the full black gown.
Right.
Now, you don't know if it's a woman or a man. They could be carrying a Kalashnikov underneath their dress.
Right.
And some terrorists have committed murder by dressing up as women and doing this.
Right.
So come here, be Canadian, act Canadian, go to Canadian schools, do not live in enclaves.
Right.
And that's, I think that's just part of it. I mean, there's a lot more, but I think that's important.
Okay, well, those are very good suggestions, Dave, and we need to wrap up now. But I want to thank you very much for coming down to the studio, and also want to thank you for all the service that you've done to make the world a safer place.
My pleasure.
Over many years. So
thank you for having me.
We all really appreciate it. So that's Dave Sheskin, new book, Waltzing with the Wicked, waltzingwicked.com. Check it out.